up with another. Earlier in the week, I started planning like tomorrow, Tuesday, I started thinking about what should I preach, and I try to keep things that are pertinent, relevant. Now, certainly there are things to say, about Jesus at any time, no doubt about it. But the more I studied, the more I then got into the subject of where we are today. Lawless. And I don't want to start preaching politics at this point. I may end up, but not right now. But I would like to just read one verse out of the book of Judges, the very last verse, in fact, 21:25, Judges 21:25. In those days there was no king in Israel. Every man did that which was right in his own eyes. Okay? There was no leadership in the country. Can a country survive where there is no leadership? Before I speak of this week or this year, let's go to the Bible. I'm going to back up into the book of Judges because it was a period of time as it closed the book. There was no leadership in the country. There were 12 tribes that had settled in there. And these 12 tribes, then of course there were various cities that they had taken over, many of the Canaanite cities as well. So I'm going to read a passage of Scripture out of chapter 19. We'll begin reading in verse 11. I'm going to read through the end of the chapter so that we can kind of get ourselves going to the subject matter. And when they were by Jebus, by the way, a Jebusite city, and let me just stop for just a moment. Jebus was a Canaanite city, but it was called Jerusalem. Jerusalem. The day was far spent, and the servant said unto his master, Come, I pray thee, and let us turn into the city of the Jebusites, and lodge in it. And his master said unto him, We will not turn aside hither into the city of a stranger, that is not of the children of Israel. We will pass over to Gibeah. And he said unto his servant, Come, and let us draw near to one of these places to lodge all night, in Gibeah or in Ramah. And they passed on and went their way, and the sun went down upon them when they were by Gibeah, which belongeth to Benjamin, so the tribe of Benjamin. And they turned aside thither to go in and to lodge in Gibeah. And when he went in, he sat him down in a street of the city, for there was no man that took them into his house to lodging. You understand, they didn't have any Holiday Inns or anything along those lines. People, when they would travel, which normally they're not very often, but you either camped outside or you had a relative you could come and visit, or things along those lines. So journey and travel was not a big thing in those days. And behold, there came an old man from his work out of the field at even, which was also of Mount Ephraim. And he sojourned in Gibeah. But the men of the place were Benjamites. And when he had lifted up his eyes, he saw a wayfaring man in the street of the city. And the old man said, Whither goest thou? And whence comest thou? And he said unto him, We are passing from Bethlehem, Judah, toward the side of Mount Ephraim. From thence am I. And I went to Bethlehem, but I am now going to the house of the Lord. And there is no man that receiveth me to house. Yet there is both straw and provender for our asses, donkeys. And there is bread and wine also for me, and for thy handmaid, and for the young man which is with thy servants. There is no want of anything. And the old man said, Peace be with thee. Howsoever, let all thy wants lie upon me. Only lodge not in the street. So they brought him in to his house and gave them provender unto the asses, and they washed their feet and did eat and drink. Now, as they were making their hearts merry, behold, the men of the city, certain sons of Belial, of the devil, if you will, beset the house round about, and beat at the door, and spake to the master of the house, the old man, saying, Bring forth the man that came into thine house, that we might know him. They are talking of sodomy. They are talking of lasciviousness. They are talking of rape and anything along those lines. I want us to understand this at this point. And the man, the master of the house, went out unto them and said unto them, Nay, my brethren, nay, I pray you, do not so wickedly, seeing that this man is come into mine house. Do not this folly. Behold, here is my daughter a maiden, and his concubine, them I will bring out now, and humble ye them. Now this gets disgusting, I'll tell you what. It'd be, I ain't coming out, neither are they. If anybody's coming out, I am, you know. And we'll just have to throw down, and probably that'll be the end of that. Ye then, and do with them what seemeth good unto you, but unto this man do not so vile a thing. Can you imagine? But the men would not hearken to him, so the man took his concubine, and brought her forth unto them, and they knew her, and abused her all the night until the morning. And when the day began to spring, they let her go. Then came the woman in the dawning of the day, and fell down at the door of the man's house, where her Lord was, till it was light. And her Lord rose up in the morning, and opened the doors of the house, and went out to go his way. And behold, the woman, his concubine, by the way, his wife, was fallen down at the door of the house, and her hands were upon the threshold, crawled up. And he said unto her, Up, and let us be going. But none answered. Then the man took her up upon his ass, and the man rose up, and gat him unto his place. And when he was come into his house, he took a knife. Now, this really gets gross, by the way. Some of the most pathetic stories in the Bible. I want you to understand. This is grotesque. And when he was come into his house, he took a knife. Now, obviously, his wife was dead. And laid hold on his concubine, and divided her, together with her bones, into 12 pieces, and sent her into all the coasts of Israel. And it was so that all that saw it said, There was no such deed done nor seen from the day that the children of Israel came up out of the land of Egypt unto this day. Consider of it. Take advice and speak your minds. How gross, how disgusting. I have read over this many times. Never in my life have I preached on this subject. I want you to know. And there are certain scriptures, by the way, in the Bible, which I kind of, as a preacher, I kind of tiptoe by the very nature of this, the very evil in the streets of this city, Gibeon. So here we find this Levite, which means he was from the tribe of Levi. He was, and not get into all that stuff, but he had gone down to Bethlehem, Judah, and they basically fetched his wife back. She'd run away from him. Okay. So I don't think there was a whole lot of, I don't know, we're not getting into that. There's many sermons I guess you could preach along those lines. But anyway, he is going back home with his wife. He has a servant, a young man with him, and gives a description of the things he's got. Now, a Levite was from the tribe of Levi. Probably a priest did certain things, you know, in that day. They would have had the tabernacle, and so obviously they were going to worship, as he said, but that was something entirely different that takes place. They come upon this city. They had passed others. Time was passing, and so some would be in a servant saying, well, why don't we go here? Well, that's a Canaanite city. They're probably not going to be real friendly with us at this point. So we'll go on to one of our own cities of Israel. Time had passed. It had become evening time, and they come upon this. Well, we'll go into this town because, you know, they're of the tribe of Benjamin. Okay, so that they do. Now they walk in, and yet, isn't it interesting how some folks, you can go places. Have you ever been somewhere where just people weren't even friendly? I have. In fact, here a few weeks ago, I went, Campbell and I, we went down to London. They had the Rib and Jazz Fest or whatever. There was a car. Any of you go, by the way? You did? Campbell and I did too. And that was Dar, they were gone, so it was Grandpa, grandson. We had a good evening, you know. And then, of course, there was a car show, and I'm indoctrinating him. He's learning more about cars and that stuff, you know. So we're going through, and I remember on that, we were going by, and I noticed the one car I'd seen sitting down the road at a neighbor's house, and he was there at the car show. I walked up to him, hey, you know, I'm your neighbor down the road, blah, blah, blah. And the guy just looked at me, so I put my hand back. And he wasn't very neighborly. So now from this point on, you know what? I don't like that guy. I don't care if his car quits on the road, I'm driving right on by. He wasn't friendly to me at all. And so then my mind goes, okay, well, I'm thinking, well, yeah, there's COVID, whatever. Out in boonies where we live, give me a break. But anyway, no place to stay. And then this old guy walks, he sees him there in the street. Boy, when you see somebody that's in need, what's your attitude? Are you willing to help others in need? I gotta admit, there are certain things that come on the television. That tunnel to towers, maybe you give to that. I keep telling Darlene, she's the money bags, and I said, we need to send money to that. You know, the tunnel to towers, and especially when what has transpired this week, when I see those men, those soldiers with legs missing and arms missing. That one poor guy with his face burned off, you know. What an insult to them today. But that's later on. I just want to get, I am so frustrated today with what is taking place in our country. I can, like the old saying, I think I can bite nails, you know. But here we got an old man he's out, you know, he's tired, he comes in, you know, when you're tired, normally when you're tired, you're irritable too. Sometimes, normally I'm not short-fused, not normally. Now yesterday I was out there, I laid on the ground, Jim had a little battery chainsaw, I laid on the ground crawling under all those, and I've got many pine trees around my house, to folks know. But then they've got these like mulberry trees or something growing up inside them. So I can't sit on the porch and enjoy it without darling. Look at all those trees. You need to do something about all those trees that are growing up inside the trees. You know, now at mid-80s, 86 degrees, whatever, yesterday afternoon, I'm laying under those things, cutting them out. So by the time I get done with that, remember what I said about being tired and irritable? Now I got to admit, on the other side there was another. I was done. Filled the trailer up, hauled them out here to the burning pile. And then she says, well, I see some over there you didn't get. I'm surprised the sheriff didn't come and get it. But here's an old man come out of the fields at night. He worked all day, and yet he looks and he sees somebody else in need. So he stops and asks him, I see you're in the, do you have any place to stay? Have you eaten? That was always one thing about going to Kentucky. Mother's was from Carter, Kentucky. Friday evening sometimes, we would all load in the car and head to Carter, Kentucky. And I can remember when we'd get there, it'd be after dark, we'd go in there, we'd knock at Grandma's door. One of the first things, what is upon my honor anyway? But I guess it was upon my honor. I don't know. I still don't know what that hillbilly term was. But upon my honor, come on in. The very next thing that they would say, or Grandma would say, was, have you eaten? Have you eaten? Here's this old boy. He probably didn't say upon my honor or anything, but he said, have you eaten? I got stuff in my house. You come on in. You're not staying out on the street. No. In fact, who are you? Well, I'm an Ephraimite. I said, is that contagious? You know, no, I'm from Ephraim. He said, well, I am too. You ever run across quotes like that? Years ago, in the early 80s, I was doing a job in Houston, Texas. And we'd taken a break, you know, and there was a 7-Eleven or something right beside that place, and we're sitting there drinking a pop about mid-morning. A car pulls up, and this old boy rolls down the window and says, hey, can you tell us where the bus stop is? I said, buddy, I'm from Ohio. We're just down here. You are? He said, I'm from London. I said, are you? I said, I'm from West Yam. Well, we just had ourselves a reunion there for about a moment. So I kind of thought, as he says, well, I'm from Ephraim. He said, well, I am too. You'll have to come in and stay a while. Come on in. Now, the old man knew something that the other guy didn't know, was how wicked the streets of the city were. They were lawless, for sure. And in fact, Gibeah had been a Canaanite city, but had been captured by the tribe of Benjamin, and so they took it in. It was wicked. It was ungodly. It was immoral. It was unsafe. And in fact, verse 22 that I read said these were the sons of Belial. Evil. They showed up after they had eaten. Beating on the door. Surrounded the house. So obviously they're outnumbered. Now what do we do when we're outnumbered? There's two things you can do even in the animal world. You know, it is either fight or flight. Just think about it. I don't care what it is. There's fight or flight. What do we do? Do we give in? Now, there's a spiritual battle going on today as well. I guess the question is, what do we do? These sons of Belial, yes, they were outnumbered. And so they beat, they're very boisterous. They weren't timid. You know, the devil, many times, he's not timid. Christians are. Think about it. Bring forth the man that we may know him. They're talking sexual molesting, if you will. We are talking homosexual activity at this point. And the Levite, what did he have? Well, he had a wife that he had retrieved from Bethlehem. That's a long story. Go back and read it for yourself. It's interesting. He had a servant boy. He had two, as the Bible said, 2 asses or donkeys. That was all he had. But here, I think, becomes one of the most unbelievable, abominable things to take place. He surrenders his wife. Now, let's jump back to where we are this week. Many, they were saying, even in Afghanistan, which is, people fleeing, and men running and leaving, even women and children, chasing that plane, taking off, some falling thousands of feet, seeing that, that's desperation, no doubt about it, desperation. Ridiculous, but that's another place. He surrenders his wife to these men. That blows my mind. It blows my mind to think about it. Because I can assure you that would not happen. Now, I've had folks say, well, preacher, what would you do? And there are certain events that you may say, well, I can't really say, and I've given this answer, I can't tell you if I've never, had that happen to me, what am I going to do? I'm here to tell you, if I was lined up and I'm getting ready to be shot, I'm going to turn around and I'm going to try to hit that guy right in my mouth before I leave. But to surrender my wife to these men, knowing what they're going to do, and the Bible says, what all the things, they raped her, they passed her around, it says, all night. And then, and he's behind the door. Could you imagine what all was taking place? And as she crawls back to the front door and dies right there at that doorstep, he opens the door, he picks her up, puts her on one of the donkeys, and he goes on home. And then, even with that impediment, he cuts her up into 12 pieces. Isn't that disgusting? Mm-hmm. That is disgusting. Mm-hmm. Sends each part to a different tribe and says, I want you to know what has happened. Are we going to tolerate this kind of stuff? This kind of ungodliness? Are we going to tolerate lawlessness in the streets of our cities? Are we going to tolerate this? Well, as the 12 tribes answered and they showed up, they said, what? No, we're not. They made a call on Benjamin, bring the men out, and they refused. Now you need to understand the tribe of Benjamin. That was the smallest tribe, but I'll tell you what, they were fighters. I mean, they were men of war. Now others had warriors, no doubt about it. In fact, we're talking about tens of thousands. Israel had about 400,000 fighters, it says. I mean, they called out 400,000 men against this, against the tribe of Benjamin, and they were able, through their tribe, they got 26,700 men to go back. But that's, said, well, bring these men out, that they may be tried and executed for their behavior. They said, we ain't done it. We're not going to do it. In fact, you don't have the right. So maybe they're throwing out states' rights there. I don't know. Mm-hmm. But they refused. So they called to battle. And there are 3 battles. As you read on, you'll find that they have. In the first battle, as tribe of Benjamin, man, they just cleaned house. In fact, they killed 22,000 Israelites at that point. They go against them. They went out and they sought the Lord. Should we go back to battle again? He said, yes, go back to battle again. Second battle then, Israelites, 18,000 are defeated by these 26,000. Men, they were warriors. They pray again, Lord, what should we do? The third time they go out. He said, the third time you're going to get them. Don't worry. Now it's kind of interesting. You read how they all of this is in the Bible, by the way. Read and what they do in this third battle. And by the way, it is learned, I guarantee you, all over the world, because what they did, they baited them. You know, they got them to come out chasing, thinking we got them on the run again, and then the big army does come down on the people. In fact, on that third battle, 25,100 Benjamites die. They're almost wiped out. That whole tribe is almost wiped out at that point in time. And as far as they went chasing the rest of them, they burned the cities of the Benjamites. Civil war had broken out, you see, because of lawlessness and sin. Well, that's terrible, preacher. It's terrible. I said all of that to bring us up to where we are today. America is filled with lawlessness today. We have, and I don't know, we're on Facebook or whatever, we may get taken off, but I am. We have a fraudulent government in power in our country right now. Our elections were stolen, I believe that just as sure as I stand before you today. Yes. We have an incompetent president that was not elected. But for those that voted, it was not a vote for this man that hid in the basement. It was a vote for, or shall we say against, the previous president. Mm-hmm. Think of that. We have an incompetent president. We have an incompetent Secretary of State. We have an incompetent general that was more concerned about an army that is woke than what they were of fighting men. Incompetent Secretary of Defense. It is unbelievable. In my lifetime of 70-some years, I have never, and being a student of history, I guarantee you I could teach history of this country in any level. I have been, that has been my passion, shall we say. History. But we are in a place of incompetence. Yes. God help us. Lawlessness. We've got a border that is not even being, I can't get in my car like a few years ago. Isaac and I, we drove clear up through Michigan into Canada, no big deal. Now, I did have trouble getting back in. That guy was looking me right in the eye and telling me, "You an American?" Well, yeah. I had to look him right in the eye. And he's looking in my eye to see whether or not everything he asked me, I was telling the truth. There's the interesting thing about telling the truth. When you tell the truth, you never have to, you don't deviate from that. I don't have to tell another lie to cover that lie, back and forth. Yeah. But where we are today is unbelievable. I can't get out of the country and then back in. But yet we've got folks that can show up from everywhere on this planet and walk right through. COVID, whatever. Well, preacher, you're supposed to be preaching about Jesus and loving God and all that stuff. I'm preaching about where we are and who we are and what's going on in the world around us right now. Amen. We need to be more adamant and vocal about what is going on. Folks, this is going toward the end of time. Yes. The end of time. If America's teeth have been taken out and we are now just a, shall I say, a fraction of what we once were. We can say all we want about it. We have the most powerful military in the world. Oh, really? Yeah. You got a 6th century army that could march right on through? My word, the tribe of Benjamin had 700 left-handed slingsmen, the Bible says, and they were slaying thousands. Don't tell me how tough we are. I think we must be a bunch of wusses in the day in which we live. This is not the America my ancestors came to and developed and built a country. This is not the America that I grew up in. Oh, God help us. We need to have more from the pulpit. They were preaching this kind of stuff from the pulpit when the Revolutionary War took off in this country. They were preaching this. It was from the pulpit that brought freedom to this land. It was the message of Christ that could bring redemption to mankind. This has been in the making where we are today. This has been in the making since the 60s for sure. My question, and we're going to come to a close at this point. Well, preacher, how in the world do you want to invite anybody to pray? Listen, we ought to all be praying today. Yes. What is taking place in this country? The bills that are going forth, it is being planned by madmen and women. Trillions and trillions. Look around, you see children and grandchildren, some of these little ones. What we are allowing in this country right now is an indebtedness. Every child right now, what kind of indebtedness we have? I don't know how much debt you owe. Actually, I don't owe a whole lot. But each and every one of us, national debt, $750,000 each is. If we divided that up and everybody paid up, $750,000 in debt to each, and that's only in 330-some million people. The national debt is gone crazy. And that's before all these bills. I don't know if you haven't paid any attention to what's going on in this country, folks. We're in a mess. And we are cursing our children and grandchildren for what is going on now. This has been in the making, as I said, certainly since the 60s. More government, more government, more government. Our founding fathers did not have this in mind. Our Constitution does not bear this out either. And yet that's what we see. Even Jesus, by the way, I was telling Sunday school class, became, when Jesus came, religion in Israel became so legalistic that you couldn't walk a mile on the Sabbath. When you begin to think all the things and all the laws, and then we're enacting more and more to give more power and more power to the government. By the way, this church, I want you to know you're in violation with the EPA. And in fact, they said if we didn't get things straightened up, they're going to start fining us. Now that's because that well out there has been there for 60 years. And now we got kids that'll run in and out and drink at the water fountain or whatever. Now I guarantee you that water is no different than those of you who live down the road You know, you drink your water, you take a bath. They even came out and checked the baptistry when we turned the faucet on in the baptistry. I can remember as a church we went down, we had Brother Hannah brought in a galvanized bucket with a dipper, and that's how, and we had outside toilets out here at that little old country church. Boy, would the EPA have fun with that now. Government. Now, I got to admit, when it was started, the EPA, Cuyahoga River was on fire. Yeah, but there, you know, we need some management. Don't get me wrong. I asked the lady years ago. I said, "What about separation?" Well, separation of church and state. Well, that doesn't matter with this. Well, it does to me. Isn't it something? Well, I could go on and rant and rave, but let's get a song, sister. We need to close. Shut this preacher up. If you feel like praying after all of this, but I'll tell you what, I think it's something that we need to be made aware of. Our country is in a mess. And I'm not kidding about my word. What we see taking place in this country. Oh, I am appalled. We need to pray. But we need to have a voice. You're not going to get this on ABC, NBC, CBS. Look, you're not going to get that. But you need to know what is going on in our society. Is this playing in? Many would say this is playing into the end of time. Something had to happen to remove America from the world stage before the end of time. This may be it. While we stand, while we stand.